We like to think of our homes and our favorite quiet spots as sanctuaries. These are the places where we can escape the chaos of the world, let our guard down, and just be alone with our thoughts. But the scary truth is, we are never truly as alone as we think we are. Sometimes there is someone watching us from the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to step into our lives and change them forever. Today, we are going inside 3 terrifying cases where ordinary people captured their stalkers on camera and realized just how close they came to a complete nightmare. Our first story begins with a young woman who had just moved to a quiet, mostly rural area. She was someone who did not love the hustle and bustle of the city, so being in a quiet neighborhood with not a lot going on was absolutely ideal for her. It did not take her long to get acquainted with the surrounding area, specifically the deep forests that bordered her new neighborhood. The area she lived in was heavily wooded, with endless paths and trails winding through the trees. Practically right outside her back door was a small path that led deep into the woods, and she spent her first few weeks exploring these new trails, enjoying the peacefulness of nature. One day, while she was hiking, she found a little path that ended up connecting to a legitimate trail from a local park near her house. It was not a state park or anything like that, just a local nature reserve where people could park and hike. She thought it was incredibly cool that she had her own private path leading directly to this public park. So every Saturday, she made it a routine to wake up early and hike in the woods around her house. She would try to find new areas of the forest that she had not been to yet. At some point during the day, she would make her way to the public park trails, head to the public restroom there to freshen up, rest on the benches if she needed a break, and then head back through the woods to get back to her house. Whenever she found a cool new area in the woods, she would pull out her phone and record a little video. It was nothing crazy, almost just like a little video diary to talk about where she was and how she was feeling. These videos were just for her, and she did not post them online or share them on social media. It was not about views or anything like that. She just wanted to document her travels and one day put them all together in a compilation video for herself. She had found some truly amazing places on some of her travels, including a small hidden waterfall that fell into a crystal clear creek. It felt almost dreamlike, and she loved having these little secrets hidden in the middle of the woods. But on the day of our story, the place she found was nothing special. She had been hiking for a while and stumbled upon a small clearing in the woods. There was a swampy patch of land there, and even though it was not as beautiful as the waterfall, she still found it peaceful. However, she remembered feeling strangely uncomfortable that day as she walked through the trees. She did not know why, but she just had a bad feeling. She felt completely on edge, and every single sound in the woods made her tense up. She had walked these woods dozens of times, and she had never felt like this before. So, when she finally got to the swampy clearing and felt a brief moment of peace, she decided to pull out her phone to record a quick video diary. She recorded a video that lasted maybe a few seconds, describing the area and how she was feeling, saying that she was probably going to head back to the public restroom in a minute, and then go home. As soon as she was done recording, she started making her way toward the public trails. Eventually, she reached the public restrooms at the park. As she walked out of the bathroom, a man in a black hoodie, a purple hat, and dark sunglasses came right up to her. He looked at her and said, "Hey there." He said it with a lot of confidence, almost like he knew her. She said hi back politely, if not a little surprised by the sudden interaction. He then made a weird joke about how they had almost bumped into each other, and she just laughed awkwardly and tried to walk away. As she was walking away, she could hear his footsteps right behind her. She turned around and the man waved and said, "Looks like we are going to hit the same trail." She smiled, but she was starting to get major creep vibes from this guy. She decided to lie and told him that she was actually waiting for someone, and was just stretching before they arrived. The man nodded, said okay, and continued walking for several feet, but then he stopped. He turned around, walked back toward her, and asked if she could help him. He claimed that his car was messed up, and that he needed help getting it started. He said he knew how to fix it, but his hands were too big. and he asked if she could use her small fingers to reach in and pop the hood because the latch was stuck. This seemed incredibly sketchy to her. She pointed out that he had just said he was taking the same trail as her, and now he was suddenly asking for help with his car instead. She doubled down on her lie, telling him again that she was waiting for a friend who would be arriving any minute. The man just laughed and said he was planning to take the trail to get to his car, even though the parking lot was in the complete opposite direction. Her inner alarm bells were screaming at this point, and she considered running back into the restroom, locking the door, and calling someone to pick her up. She did not know if this guy was just an awkward person trying to get her number, or if he had genuinely dangerous intentions. Thankfully, right at that moment, a couple walked by. The young woman did not hesitate. She walked right up to the female stranger and greeted her warmly, acting as if they were old friends who had not seen each other in years. The couple was understandably confused at first, but the woman took one look at the fear written all over the narrator's face and realized exactly what was happening. The creepy man in the purple hat lingered awkwardly for a second, almost as if he was trying to see if she was bluffing about knowing these people. The narrator kept up the act, making small talk and even asking the couple how their parents were doing. After a tense minute of this, the creepy man finally turned around and began walking toward the parking lot. Once he was completely out of earshot, the narrator immediately thanked the couple for playing along. She explained that the man had been waiting outside the restroom for her and refused to leave her alone. She watched as the man got into a small red sedan, which she believed was a red Chevy Cruze, and drove away. The couple kindly offered to call the police, but she told them it was okay and she just wanted to get home. They offered to drive her home, but she declined, wanting to walk since her house was not that far away. She practically ran all the way back to her house that afternoon. It had been such a bizarre and unsettling day. From that horrible feeling of dread she felt while hiking to the creepy encounter at the restroom, she could not wait to just lock her doors, sit on her couch, and relax with a glass of wine. Once she calmed down, she opened her phone to look through the photos and the short video diary she had recorded at the swampy clearing earlier that day. She pressed play on the video, and as she watched it, her heart completely stopped. In the video, she was speaking to the camera, saying that she was going to head to the restroom and then go home. But in the background of the video, standing just inside the dense tree line, was the man with the purple hat and the black hoodie. He was standing perfectly still, watching her from the shadows of the trees while she filmed herself. He had been stalking her deep in the woods, long before they ever crossed paths at the public restroom. The realization hit her like a wave of pure terror. He had followed her through the isolated trails, waited for her outside the restroom, and tried to lure her to his car under a false pretense. The same car that was supposedly broken, but that he had easily started up and driven away in. She immediately called the police department and reported everything, handing over the video as evidence. The police searched the area and conducted an investigation, but they were never able to identify or locate the man in the purple hat. She never hiked alone again, and she moved away from that neighborhood about a year later, forever grateful to the couple who had unwittingly saved her life. And so, we see how easily a peaceful walk in the woods can turn into a hunt, with the predator hiding in plain sight. But sometimes the danger does not wait for us in the woods. Sometimes it manages to find its way inside the very homes we live in, hiding in the dark corners where we least expect it. Our second story involves a man named Ron and his wife Tina, who had just bought their very first house. This was about 4 years ago, and at first everything seemed absolutely perfect. It was a beautiful, charming little home located in a very safe and quiet neighborhood. A few months after they moved in, the narrator met up with Ron for some drinks to catch up, and he asked how the new house was treating them. Immediately, Ron started acting very strange and evasive. When the narrator pressed him for details, Ron finally caved in and confessed what had been bothering him. He and Tina were absolutely convinced that their new house was haunted. Now, the narrator was a massive skeptic who did not believe in ghosts, spirits, or anything paranormal. He actually laughed when Ron first told him this, asking him why on earth he thought his house was haunted. Ron explained that when they bought the house, the real estate agent had disclosed that the previous owner had died inside the home. This was not a secret, and it was actually the reason they were able to buy the house for such a cheap price. But because of this piece of information, Ron and Tina had slowly convinced themselves that the spirit of the deceased owner was lingering in the house. The narrator tried to rationalize with him, saying that just because someone passed away there, it did not mean there was a ghost. But Ron insisted that the things happening in the house could not be explained. He explained that every single night without fail, both he and Tina would wake up at some random hour in the middle of the night to strange noises. It was not the sound of pipes creaking or the house settling. Ron said it sounded like something was actively bumping into furniture and moving things around in the dark. They would wake up in the morning and find that furniture had been slightly shifted. Objects on the kitchen counter would be misplaced or completely gone. In fact, a few days prior, Ron had left his favorite Miami Dolphins coffee mug on the counter, and in the morning it had completely vanished. They searched every cabinet and drawer, but the mug was nowhere to be found. Ron admitted that at first he tried to convince himself that it was just a series of weird coincidences. But everything changed a few nights before this conversation. Just like many nights before, Ron and Tina woke up in the dead of night to a loud, heavy crash coming from the basement. Terrified but wanting answers, Ron decided to go down and investigate. The basement was incredibly cluttered, packed to the brim with cardboard boxes, old furniture, and storage containers, making it hard to see if anything had actually fallen over. But while Ron was standing in the dark basement, he saw a distinct shadow move in the far corner of the room. He was so utterly terrified that he ran up the stairs, slammed the door, and had refused to go back down ever since. They were so frightened that they had actually slept in a hotel for the last 2 nights, refusing to stay in their own home until they could figure out what to do. Ron was practically in tears as he explained this, describing it as an intense, paralyzing phobia. He was convinced that there was something malevolent lurking in his basement. The narrator felt terrible seeing his friend so broken down and sleep-deprived, but he still thought the entire thing was ridiculous. He offered to go to the house and thoroughly check the basement himself to prove to them that there were no ghosts, and that whatever they were experiencing had a logical explanation. Ron was hesitant, worried that the narrator's presence might anger the spirit, and when he called Tina to tell her the plan, she got into a massive argument with him. She was 100% convinced that the house was haunted and did not want anyone going down there. Despite her warnings, Ron agreed to drive the narrator to the house, but he insisted on waiting outside in the car, and they agreed not to tell Tina. When they arrived at the house, Ron begged the narrator one last time to be careful and not to mock the spirit. The narrator just smiled, nodded, and walked inside. Of course, being a natural skeptic, the narrator fully intended to make fun of the imaginary ghost, just to prove how silly the whole thing was. As he walked through the main floor of the house, everything seemed completely normal, except for a very unpleasant odor hanging in the air. It did not smell demonic or supernatural. It smelled like strong, dirty, unwashed body odor. The narrator ignored the smell and opened the basement door, stepping down into the dark, cluttered space. He looked around at the towering stacks of boxes, and then, wanting to tease Ron, he pulled out his phone and started recording a video in selfie mode. He spoke directly to the camera, saying that he had been down there for a few minutes and had not seen any ghosts, monsters, or paranormal activity, just a bunch of useless storage. He turned the camera around and raised it over his shoulder to show the rest of the basement. But as he did, he caught a glimpse of something strange in the corner of his phone screen. He slowly panned the camera back toward the dark corner of the basement, and there, sitting quietly on the floor amidst the boxes, was a sickly, disheveled old man. He was not a ghost, and he was not a demon. He was a real living, breathing person, staring blankly back at him. Instinct took over. The narrator immediately cut the recording, dropped his phone, and sprinted up the wooden basement stairs. He slammed the heavy door shut and threw his entire body weight against it to keep it closed. A second later, A horrific sound came from the other side of the door. The old man began to scream, but it was not a normal scream. It was a painful, animalistic wailing. The man threw himself against the basement door, trying frantically to force it open. Holding the door shut with one hand, the narrator used his other hand to call Ron, screaming into the phone for him to call the police because there was a man living in his house. The man on the other side of the door kept pounding, his screams turning into a desperate, repetitive chant of "No, no, no," over and over again. It took about 10 painful minutes for the police to arrive, and the entire time, the narrator had to fight with everything he had to keep that door locked. As soon as he heard the police officers enter the front house, the narrator let go of the door and stepped back. The basement door burst open, and the old man lunged out. For a split second, the narrator stood face to face with him. The man's eyes looked completely glassy and plastic, completely detached from reality. He let out a deafening scream right into the narrator's face, knocking him backward onto the floor, and then bolted out the back door of the house. The narrator scrambled to his feet and chased after him, but the old man was shockingly fast. By the time the police officers made their way to the back of the house, the man had disappeared into the surrounding neighborhood. They searched the area for hours, but they never found him. Afterward, the narrator, Ron, and the police went down into the basement to investigate. In the far dark corner, they found a small pillow, a dirty blanket, and a pile of garbage. The terrible smell of body odor was overwhelming in that corner, and sitting right next to the blanket was Rona's missing Miami Dolphins coffee mug. It turned out that Tina grew up in a very safe neighborhood and had a habit of never locking the front or back doors of the house. At some point, this mentally ill, homeless man had simply walked through an unlocked door, crept down into their basement, and made himself a home. He had been living right beneath them for months, coming up into their kitchen at night to steal food, move their furniture, and live his life while they slept. But the problem with leaving doors unlocked, or assuming that a safe neighborhood means you are completely immune to danger, is that there are always people out there looking for an opening. And sometimes, even if your doors are locked tight, they will still find a way to terrorize you. This brings us to our third story, which took place about a month ago. The narrator of this story was asked to house sit and dog sit for his boss for a few days. It was an incredibly easy job. His boss was very wealthy, lived in a beautiful mansion in a high-end neighborhood, and his dog, Max, was the most laid-back and well-behaved dog ever. Plus, the narrator really needed some extra money, so accepting the job was a no-brainer. But the narrator had a major issue when it came to sleeping in places that were not his own home. He was not an insomniac, but he struggled immensely to sleep in unfamiliar beds. Knowing that he would likely be up late into the night, he brought along his Nintendo Switch to keep himself entertained, intending to finally play through the remake of Paper Mario. The Thousand-Year Door. On his first night, he did exactly that, staying up until the early hours of the morning playing his game. The second night, a little after 10 in the evening, he decided to take Max out for a quick walk around the quiet neighborhood. As they were walking back toward the boss's house, the narrator thought he saw a dark figure standing near the side of the home. He slowed his pace and squinted into the darkness, but the shadows were too deep to see clearly. When he got closer, the figure was gone. He assumed his tired mind was just playing tricks on him, as the darkness often does when you are in an unfamiliar place. He went back inside, locked the door, and went back to playing his game. By the time 1 in the morning rolled around, he realized he had left his phone charger in his car parked in the driveway. He stepped outside to grab it, and as he did, he looked down the street. A few houses away, standing perfectly still under the dim glow of a street lamp, was a person dressed entirely in black. The person was not doing anything illegal or explicitly threatening, but it was incredibly weird for someone to be standing completely motionless in the middle of the street at 1 o'clock in the morning. The narrator tried to rationalize it, thinking it was probably just a neighbor stepped outside to look at the stars, and went back indoors. He played his game for another 2 hours before finally shutting it off. As he lay on the couch scrolling through his phone, he began to hear a strange, faint noise coming from the front of the house. It sounded like something was gently scratching or rubbing against the glass of the living room window. He tried to ignore it, thinking it was just a tree branch or an animal, but the sound was making him incredibly anxious. He finally got up, walked over to the window, and parted the curtains to look outside. The moment he did, he jumped back in absolute shock. A person had been leaning right up against the glass, looking inside, and the moment they saw him, they turned and sprinted away into the darkness. His adrenaline was pumping. He stood there trying to process why someone would be lurking right outside the window. He thought about calling the police, but for some reason, he hesitated. The person had run away the moment they were spotted, and they had not actively tried to break in, so he convinced himself that he was overreacting. Looking back, he felt incredibly foolish for not making that call. The next morning, he called his boss to report the strange visitor. To his surprise, his boss was completely unbothered. He explained that there was a neighborhood right behind his property where a lot of teenagers lived. He said those kids constantly cut through his backyard as a shortcut, and he had even caught them peeking through his windows on a couple of occasions as a prank. He assured the narrator that they were completely harmless. This made the narrator feel a bit better, but he still had an uneasy feeling in his gut. That night he decided to take Max for another walk, but this time they went out a bit later, around 11 o'clock. As they approached the house on their return, the narrator kept a close eye on the shadows. Sure enough, as they drew near, he saw a distinct figure standing right near the front porch. Instead of slowing down, the narrator quickened his pace, determined to confront them. The moment the figure realized they had been spotted, they turned and ran around the back of the house. The narrator quickly brought Max inside, locked him in, and then ran back outside with a heavy flashlight, hoping to scare off the troublemakers once and for all. He searched the entire backyard, shining his light into the trees and behind the bushes. But the yard was completely empty. He figured the teenagers had run back to their own neighborhood, so he went back inside and double-checked all the locks. A few hours later, around 2 in the morning, a strange impulse washed over him. He felt a sudden, inexplicable urge to look out the front window. He crept over, parted the blinds, and looked out into the street. There, standing directly under the street lamp on the grassy median across the road, was the person. They were dressed in all black, standing completely still, staring directly at the house. The narrator watched them for several minutes. The person did not move a single muscle. They just stood there, a dark silhouette in the night, watching. The narrator's anxiety began to turn into anger. If this was a prank by local teenagers, it was a deeply disturbing one, and he was tired of being targeted. He then made what he admits was the single dumbest decision of his entire life. He unlocked the front door, stepped out onto the porch, and began yelling at the figure across the street. He asked them what they wanted and told them to leave. The figure did not move. The narrator then pulled out his phone, held it up, and shouted that he was going to record them so he could show the footage to the police and their parents. He pressed the record button and tried to focus the camera on the dark figure across the street. And then, without a single word or warning, the person suddenly charged. They did not jog and they did not walk. They sprinted at him with terrifying explosive speed, tearing across the street directly toward the porch. Panic seized the narrator. He dropped his phone, turned around, and bolted back inside the house. He slammed the heavy wooden door shut, threw the deadbolt into place, and collapsed against the door, his heart hammering against his ribs. He waited in the pitch-black entryway, listening intently. A moment later, the doorbell rang. He did not move. He did not make a sound. The doorbell rang a second time. Then, he heard the metal doorknob begin to rattle violently as the person on the other side tried to force their way in. Thankfully, the lock held. When the doorknob stopped rattling, a voice spoke from the other side of the wood. It was not the voice of a screaming, angry teenager. It was a calm, completely rational, and chillingly polite voice that softly said, "Have a good night." The narrator was completely paralyzed with fear. He finally summoned the courage to call the police, but by the time they arrived, the mysterious figure had vanished into the night. Even with the brief video the narrator had managed to capture, the officers admitted there was very little they could do. When his boss returned a few days later, the narrator showed him the video. The boss's face turned completely pale. He looked at the screen, and then looked at the narrator, his voice trembling. He said that the person in the video was absolutely not one of the local teenagers. He had no idea who it was. The terrifying reality was that some random, dangerous predator had been roaming the neighborhood that night, saw that the narrator was home alone, and decided to target him for reasons that will never be known. His boss immediately went out and purchased high-end security cameras for every corner of the property. But to this day, the narrator is left with the haunting question of what would have happened if he had not locked that door in time. He had come face to face with a monster, and he had barely escaped with his life. These stories serve as a chilling reminder of the hidden dangers that lurk just beyond the edge of our vision. Whether we are walking down a quiet trail in the woods, resting in the comfort of our own homes, or staying in an unfamiliar place, we must always remain vigilant, because you never truly know who is watching from the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to step out of the dark. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of today's episode in the comments. And remember, we have a whole playlist of true crime episodes ready for you to binge right now. Until next time, see ya.